The bulldozers arrived at dawn, their steel teeth gleaming in the morning light. Karen Martinez stood in her marble foyer, clutching the deed to what she believed was her $2.3 million dream home, watching through floor-tussling windows as her perfectly manicured world began to crumble. She had no idea that the quiet man in the hard hat directing the demolition crew was David Chunda, real owner of every inch of land beneath her Italian tile floors. For 18 months, she'd lived in paradise, built on a lie. Now, with one court order, her American dream was about to become as perfectly legal. Via morning, Karen Martinez's life imploded, started like any other perfect day in her perfect home. She stood on the wraparound deck of her 4,200-square-foot colonial revival, sipping her usual fair trade Colombian coffee from a hand-thrown ceramic mug, watching the sunrise paint her meticulously landscaped 3 acres in shades of gold. Infinity pools sparkled like scattered diamonds. The guest house sat prettily among the mature oak trees she'd paid extra to preserve, and her imported Japanese koi moved like living jewels through the pond she'd installed near the meditation garden. 18 months of waking up to this view, and Karen still felt that intoxicating rush of ownership, of having finally made it. At 43, after a bitter divorce that had left her with half of everything, and a burning desire to prove her ex-husband, she'd poured her settlement money into creating something spectacular, something that screamed success, something Jeremy could never afford, not on his accountant's salary. Her phone buzzed against the tick patio table, a text from her contractor, Miguel. Need to talk. Important. Can you meet at the house this morning? Karen frowned, setting down her mug. Miguel Santos had been the project manager for her dream home construction, a quiet, competent man who'd turned her Pinterest board fantasies into reality. They'd finished construction 6 months ago. What could be so urgent? She typed back. Everything okay? I'm here now. On my way. Bring all your paperwork. A chill ran down Karen's spine, despite the warm August morning. Paperwork she'd signed. Everything months ago. Paid every invoice. Her lawyer had handled the deed transfer, the permits, everything. 20 minutes later, Miguel's weathered pickup truck crunched up her gravel driveway. He climbed out slowly, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked suspiciously like dread. Behind him, a second vehicle pulled up, a newer Honda Civic that Karen didn't recognize. Miguel, what's going on? Karen called from the deck, not moving to greet them. Something about the way both men approached her home, their body language, careful, almost apologetic, made her want to maintain the high ground. The stranger was younger, maybe early 30s, wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt. Asian, with kind eyes that seemed to take in every detail of her property with an expression she couldn't quite read. He carried a manila folder thick with documents. Mrs. Martinez, Miguel began, his accent heavier than usual, a sure sign he was stressed. This is David Chen. He's the owner of this land. Karen laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off her home's perfect facade. That's impossible. I own this land. I have the deed. She gestured broadly at her domain. I built this house. I've been living here for over a year. David Chen stepped forward, his movements deliberate but not threatening. Mrs. Martinez, I understand this is confusing. May we come up and talk? You can talk from there. Karen's voice carried the authority she'd perfected during 20 years in pharmaceutical sales. The tone that had closed million-dollar deals and intimidated boardrooms full of men. I don't know what kind of scam this is, but it's not a scam. David's voice was quiet, steady. He opened the manila folder and held up a document. This is the original deed to these 3.2 acres. Registered with the county in 2019. My grandmother left me this land when she died. I've been in Taiwan for the past 3 years, settling her estate and caring for my grandfather. Karen felt her first flicker of real fear. That's impossible. I bought this land from Harold Westfield. He owned it for 30 years. Harold Westfield never owned this land, David said simply. He had a lease agreement with my grandmother, but it expired in 2020. He had no legal right to sell it. The world seemed to tilt beneath Karen's feet. She gripped the deck railing, her knuckles white against the painted wood. You're lying. My lawyer did a title search. This is legally mine. Miguel looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Mrs. Martinez, I tried to tell you during construction. Remember when I asked about the survey markers? The ones that didn't match your plot plan? Karen's mouth went dry. She did remember. Miguel had mentioned discrepancies, had suggested they halt construction until the property lines could be verified. But she'd been so eager to start, so determined to have the house finished before Jeremy's wedding to his 26-year-old secretary. She'd told Miguel to keep working, that her lawyer would handle any issues. The title search, she whispered. My lawyer said it was clean. David climbed the steps to the deck, moving slowly, his hands visible. Up close, Karen could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the patient weariness of someone who'd been fighting a long, complicated battle. Your lawyer searched the wrong property. The description in Westfield's fraudulent deed was off by about 40 feet. You legally own a narrow strip of marshland that borders my property. This house, your pool, your gardens, all of it is on my land. Karen sank into one of her expensive tick chairs, the fight draining out of her. But Harold showed me documentation. He had surveys, property tax records, forged, Miguel said quietly. I found out 3 months ago when I was trying to get permits for another project. The county flagged Harold's name. Turns out he's done this before. He finds properties where the owner is absent or deceased, creates fake deeds, and flips them to unsuspecting buyers. Where is Harold now? Karen's voice was barely a whisper. Probably somewhere without an extradition treaty, David said. The FBI has been looking for him for 2 years. Karen stared at her home, her beautiful, perfect, illegal home, and felt her entire world crumbling. What does this mean? David sat down across from her, his expression genuinely sympathetic. It means this house was built without my permission on my property. I've been trying to resolve this legally for months, Mrs. Martinez. My lawyer has been attempting to contact you through proper channels, but your attorney seems to have disappeared as well. What? Karen's head snapped up. Richard Caldwell, right? The lawyer who handled your purchase. David consulted his folder. His office was raided by the FBI 4 months ago. Apparently he was working with Harold on multiple fraudulent property deals. Karen felt like she was falling through space. Everything Harold, Richard, the perfect deal that had seemed too good to be true. It was all connected. She'd been a mark, a sucker, and she'd enthusiastically thrown her entire divorce settlement into the scam. I have homeowners insurance, she said desperately. Title insurance. Something has to protect me. David's expression grew even more sympathetic. Your title insurance is void because the original sale was fraudulent. Your homeowner's insurance covers the structure, but not your right to be here. Karen buried her face in her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were blazing with desperate fury. I don't care what your papers say. I built this house. I've lived here for 18 months. I've paid property taxes, utilities, maintenance. That has to count for something. Squatters' rights, adverse possessions. Something adverse possession requires 20 years in this state, David said gently, and it only applies when the possession is hostile and without the owner's knowledge. I've been trying to contact you about this problem for months. You can't just kick me out. This is my home. I have rights. David was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those kind, tired eyes. Mrs. Martinez, I understand this is devastating. I never wanted to hurt an innocent person, but this is my family's land. My grandmother worked 3 jobs to buy these acres in 1987. She dreamed of building a home here for her retirement, but she got sick before she could. She left it to me so I could fulfill her dream. Your dream doesn't erase mine, Karen snapped. I'm not the criminal here. I'm a victim, just like you. You're right, David said. We're both victims of the same fraud, but only one of us has legal standing to be here. Karen stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the deck. Her beautiful garden spread out below thousands of dollars in landscaping. Rare plants she'd imported, the koi pond that had cost more than most people's cars. What do you want? Money. I don't have any left. I put everything into this place. I want my land back, David said simply. I want to build a home here for my family, like my grandmother intended. And where am I supposed to go? That's not my responsibility. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She turned to face him, and for a moment, the mask of desperate politeness fell away, revealing something raw and ugly underneath. Not your responsibility. I'm about to lose everything because of some paperwork technicality, and you just shrug your shoulders. It's not a technicality. It's the law. The law, Karen spat. Easy to hide behind the law when it works in your favor. David stood as well, and for the first time, Karen heard steel in his voice. Mrs. Martinez, I've spent the last 2 years and 30. By 5 o'clock that evening, Karen Martinez had transformed from victim to warrior. She sat in her home office. She reminded herself fiercely surrounded by legal documents, printouts of property records, and 3 different laptops displaying social media feeds that were already beginning to buzz with her story. Sandra Walsh had been everything Karen hoped for in a lawyer. Sharp, aggressive, and utterly convinced that the system had failed her client. More importantly, Sandra smelled blood in the water and the potential for a high-profile case that could make her career. The law might be on his side technically, Sandra had said during their afternoon meeting, but public opinion is a powerful weapon, and judges are human beings who read the news and feel political pressure just like everyone else. Now Karen was putting that strategy into action. The Channel 7 news van pulled into her driveway at exactly 5:30 p.m., just as Karen had requested. Time for the evening news cycle, golden hour lighting for maximum visual impact. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing her outfit with the precision of a general planning a battle. Conservative blue dress that said trustworthy victim, minimal makeup that wouldn't hide the genuine exhaustion in her eyes, and her grandmother's cross necklace prominently displayed. Rebecca Torres, Channel 7's investigative reporter, was exactly what Karen had hoped for: young, ambitious, and hungry for a story that would set her apart from the pack. She brought a full crew, cameraman, sound engineer, and a producer who looked like he'd stepped out of journalism school yesterday. Mrs. Martinez, Rebecca said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Thank you for reaching out to us. This story is incredible. I can't believe it hasn't gotten media attention before. Now, I've been trying to handle it privately, Karen said, leading them toward her deck where the late afternoon sun would backlight her perfectly. But when someone threatens to destroy your home, your life, everything you've worked for, sometimes you have to speak up. The interview took 45 minutes. Karen had rehearsed her talking points, but Rebecca's questions were sharper than she'd expected. Mrs. Martinez, how much did you pay for this property? $850,000 for the land, plus another $1.4 million in construction. Costs us my entire life savings. And you had no idea the seller didn't own the property. Karen's voice broke perfectly on cue. I hired a lawyer, I got title insurance, I did everything right. Harold Westfield had documentation going back decades. I was a pharmaceutical sales executive for 20 years. I know how to verify information. But these men were professional. Criminals? Tell us about David Chen. What was your interaction with him like? This was the crucial moment. Karen had to walk a fine line. She couldn't outright lie, but she could shape the narrative. He was ... cold, unsympathetic. I'm facing homelessness, and he showed up with papers demanding I leave in 30 days. When I asked where I was supposed to go, he told me that wasn't his responsibility. He's planning to demolish your home. That's what he said. This house represents everything I've built since my divorce. I designed every room, chose every fixture. It's not just a building, it's my sanctuary, my fresh start, and he wants to tear it down like it's nothing. Rebecca leaned forward. What do you want people to know about your situation? Karen looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, her emotion was completely genuine. I want people to know that this could happen to anyone. I followed all the rules, trusted the system, and now I'm being punished for someone else's crimes. David Chen has legal ownership. Yes, but where's the justice in that? Where's the compassion? I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for fairness. After the news crew left, Karen immediately got to work on social media. She'd created accounts on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, specifically for her cause. The hashtag save, KARENS, home was already gaining traction, thanks to the pre-work she'd done that afternoon. Her first post was a video tour of her home, her voiceover explaining the heartbreak of potentially losing it. She made sure to linger on the most sympathetic details, the reading nook where she'd rebuilt her confidence after her divorce. The garden where she'd learned to find peace. The guest room she'd prepared for her estranged daughter's visits that never came. Within 2 hours, the video had 50,000 views and hundreds of comments. This is heartbreaking. How can they do this to you? David Chen should be ashamed of himself. Have some compassion. There has to be something legally that can be done. Don't give up. But not all the comments were supportive. A few users had done their own research and were asking uncomfortable questions. Wait, so she bought land from someone who didn't own it? How do you not verify that? Sounds like both people got screwed by the same scammer. Why is David Chen the villain here? Karen deleted those comments and blocked the users. This wasn't about nuance or complexity, it was about survival. Her phone rang at 8:47 p.m. Unknown number, Mrs. Martinez. The voice was male, hesitant. Who is this? This is David Chen. I just saw the news story. Karen's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. Mr. Chen, I didn't expect to hear from you. Mrs. Martinez. That interview, it wasn't accurate. I never said I didn't care where you went. I offered to help you pursue legal action against Harold Westfield. I've been trying to work with you for months through proper legal channels. The cameras don't lie, Mr. Chen. People can see what kind of person you are. There was a long pause. What kind of person am I, Mrs. Martinez? The kind who kicks a woman out of her home without a second thought. That's not. David's voice grew tighter. Mrs. Martinez, you're making me out to be the villain here. I'm not the one who committed fraud. I'm not the one who built on someone else's property without permission. I'm the victim of the same crime you are. The difference is, I'm the one who's about to be homeless because you're living on my land. For the first time, David's composure cracked. My grandmother saved for 40 years to buy this property. She dreamed of building a retirement home here, but she got sick before she could. She left it to me so I could fulfill that dream. Do you understand what it's like to come back from settling her affairs overseas and find a stranger's house built on the land she died wanting to develop? Karen felt a flicker of something, guilt, sympathy, but she pushed it down. She couldn't afford compassion right now. Your grandmother's dreams don't erase mine. No, but the law does. We'll see about that. David was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Martinez, I watched your interview. I understand you're desperate, but you're destroying my reputation to save yours. People are calling me a monster based on lies. I didn't lie about anything. You presented half-truths in a way that makes me look heartless. That's worse than lying. Karen walked to her living room window, looking out at the pool lights dancing on the water. Mr. Chen, I'm fighting for my life here. If you were in my position, wouldn't you do the same? I am in your position. Harold Westfield stole from both of us. But I'm not trying to destroy your life to get mine back. Maybe you should be. Maybe that's why you'll lose. The silence stretched between them, and Karen could feel the moment when David's patience finally snapped. Mrs. Martinez, I've tried. To be understanding, I've tried to be patient. But if you want to make this a public fight, then that's what we'll do. Just remember, you started this war. The line went dead. Karen stared at her phone, her heart racing. She'd gotten under his skin, which meant her strategy was working. But something about the quiet certainty in David's voice made her uneasy. She shook off the feeling and returned to her laptop. The Channel 7 story would air tomorrow morning, and she wanted to make sure her social media presence was ready to capitalize on the attention. She posted another video, this one filmed in her bedroom, speaking directly to the camera in a whisper, as if sharing an intimate secret. "I just got off the phone with David Chen," she said, her voice shaking with what appeared to be fear, but was actually adrenaline. "He's angry about today's news story. He said if I want to make this a public fight, then that's what we'll do. I'm honestly scared. This man has all the power here, and I'm just trying to save my home." She posted it with the caption, "David Chen just threatened me. I'm documenting everything now, in case something happens. Hashtag save Karen's home, hashtag justice for homeowners." The video exploded. Within an hour, it had 200,000 views and thousands of comments expressing outrage at David's threat. Local news stations were already calling, asking for follow-up interviews. A crowdfunding page someone had created for her legal expenses was approaching $50,000 in donations. Karen fell asleep that night, feeling victorious for the first time. Since Miguel and David had appeared on her deck that morning, she was winning the narrative war, and in the age of social media, that might be more important than winning in court. But she didn't sleep well. In her dreams, she saw David Chen's tired, kind eyes, and heard her own voice saying, "Maybe that's why you'll lose." When she awoke at 3 a.m., she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She pushed the feeling away and reached for her phone to check her social media metrics. The war was just beginning, and she couldn't afford to have a conscience now. By morning, hashtag save KARENS, home was trending nationally, and Karen woke to her doorbell ringing at 6:47 a.m. She stumbled downstairs in her silk robe, expecting another news crew. Channel 12 had scheduled an interview for 8 a.m., and Good Morning Sacramento wanted her on live at 9:30. The fundraising page had hit $127,000 overnight, and her lawyer Sandra was fielding calls from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to option her story. Instead, she found a process server holding an envelope thick enough to choke a horse. "Karen Martinez? Yes, you've been served." Karen's hands shook as she tore open the envelope. Inside were multiple legal documents that made her blood run cold. A cease and desist order, a defamation lawsuit seeking $2.5 million in damages, and a restraining order preventing her from mentioning David Chen by name in any public forum. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the lawsuit was a USB drive labeled evidence and a note in David's careful handwriting. "Mrs. Martinez, you prefer to have this conversation in public. I thought you should see what the public will be seeing." D. Chen laptop was still open on her kitchen counter. Logged into her social media accounts where notifications were pinging constantly, with trembling fingers, she inserted the USB drive. The first file was a video compilation titled The Real Story. It opened with David Chen sitting in what appeared to be his modest apartment, speaking directly to the camera with the same quiet dignity he'd shown at her house. "My name is David Chen, and for the past 24 hours, I've been portrayed as a heartless monster trying to steal an innocent woman's home. I want to tell you the real story." The video cut to documents, official county records, property deeds, court filings, all meticulously organized and narrated. David's voice remained calm and factual as he laid out the timeline. His grandmother's purchase of the land in 1987. The legitimate lease agreement with Harold Westfield that expired in 2020. David's 3 years in Taiwan caring for his dying grandfather while Westfield perpetrated his fraud. "Mrs. Martinez is not lying when she says she's a victim," David continued. "She was defrauded by Harold Westfield and her attorney Richard Caldwell, both of whom are now wanted by the FBI. But she's not the only victim. This is my family's land, purchased with my grandmother's life savings from 3 jobs she worked simultaneously. She cleaned offices at night, worked in a factory during the day, and took in sewing on weekends, all so she could buy a piece of America for her family." The video showed a photograph of an elderly Asian woman standing proudly in front of a for sale sign, then cut to the original deed with her signature, in careful, practiced English. "My grandmother died in 2019 without ever getting to build her dream home on this land. She left it to me with one request, that I fulfilled the dream she never could. When I returned from Taiwan in January, I discovered that not only had someone built on our property without permission, but they were claiming legal ownership based on fraudulent documents." Karen felt sick as the video continued. David showed the attempts his lawyer had made to contact her through official channels, certified letters returned unopened, phone calls to her attorney that went unreturned, even a registered letter to her door that her housekeeper had signed for but that Karen had never seen. "I spent months trying to resolve this privately, because I understand Mrs. Martinez is also a victim of this fraud. I offered to help her pursue Harold Westfield for compensation. I delayed legal action to give her time to find alternative housing. I consulted with 3 different attorneys to find a solution that might allow both of us to avoid devastation. The video showed email exchanges between David's lawyer and various legal experts, exploring options like adverse possession claims, prescriptive easements, even the possibility of David selling a portion of his land to Karen at cost. Every avenue had been legally impossible due to the fraudulent nature of the original transaction. What you won't hear from Mrs. Martinez is that I'm not wealthy. I'm a middle school science teacher. I've spent my entire life savings $43 on legal fees trying to resolve this situation fairly. I took a second job tutoring students just to afford the lawyers. I'm not some heartless developer trying to profit from someone's misery. I'm a man trying to honor his grandmother's memory and build a modest home where she always dreamed of. Living. The video cut to David's current living situation, a tiny studio apartment with a futon and a card table. Boxers of his grandmother's belongings stacked along the walls. On the table was a framed photo of the same elderly woman, and, beside it, architectural sketches for a small, simple house. These are my grandmother's original plans for our family home, David said, his voice growing thick with emotion for the first time. She drew them herself, dreaming of a place where her children and grandchildren could gather for holidays. Not a mansion, not a showcase, just a home. Karen slammed the laptop shut, her face burning with shame and fury, but her phone was already ringing. Sandra Walsh, her lawyer. Karen, we have a problem. Sandra's voice was sharp with panic. Have you seen what David Chen posted online? I'm looking at it now. It's going viral, faster than your original story. The hashtag Justice for David is trending, and people are turning on you, hard. Karen reopened her laptop and navigated to Twitter. Her heart sank as she saw the shift in public opinion happening in real time. Holy crap, Karen Martinez is a monster. This poor man is a teacher trying to honor his dead grandmother. Anyone else notice she deleted all the comments, asking hard questions? She's been manipulating the narrative from day one. David Chen offered to help her sue the real criminals, and she's trying to destroy him instead. What a sociopath. $127,000 in donations for someone who's been lying to us. I want my money back. The crowdfunding page had been flooded with refund requests and angry comments. The documentary filmmaker had already called Sandra to withdraw his offer. Channel 12 had canceled the morning interview, and Good Morning Sacramento was reconsidering their position. It gets worse, Sandra continued. The restraining order is probably going to be granted. If you mention his name publicly again, you could be held in contempt of court. In this defamation suit, Karen, he's got you dead to rights. You recorded a phone conversation without his consent and posted it online with false context. In California, that's not just defamation, it's a felony. Karen felt the walls closing in. What do you mean, false context? I listened to his full video. He released the complete, unedited recording of your phone conversation. You took his words completely out of context to make him sound threatening. He never threatened you, Karen. He warned you that if you wanted to make it a public fight, he'd defend himself publicly. That's not a threat, that's a promise. He just kept. Karen closed her eyes, remembering the moment on the phone when David's patience had finally snapped. She'd been so focused on winning that she'd twisted his words into something sinister, never thinking he might have recorded the conversation too. How bad is this going to get? Honestly, I don't know. The legal situation is complicated, but the public relations disaster is complete. David Chen comes across as a sympathetic, working-class hero, honoring his immigrant grandmother's memory. You come across as a privileged woman trying to steal a teacher's inheritance through social media manipulation. Karen walked to her window, looking out at her perfect pool, her perfect gardens, her perfect life that was crumbling around her. What do I do? My advice. Disappear from social media immediately. Issue a public apology. Try to negotiate a settlement that gets you out of this house with some dignity intact. An apology for what? I'm still the victim here. Sandra's sigh was audible through the phone. Karen, the victim narrative only works when people believe you're actually the victim. David Chen just proved that you're both victims of the same crime, but only one of you has been lying about it. After hanging up, Karen spent the next hour watching her carefully constructed narrative collapse in real time. David's video had been picked up by major news outlets, shared by celebrities, and turned into countless social media posts, exposing her manipulation tactics. The comments on her original posts had turned vicious. Fake tears, fake victim, fake everything. David Chen deserves better. This is what happens when entitled people think social media outrage can replace actual law. She built her house on stolen land and then tried to steal a man's reputation too. Disgusting. But Karen Martinez hadn't built a successful sales career by giving up when things got difficult. As she read the comments, scrolled through the evidence David had compiled, and watched her public support evaporate, something else began to grow inside her. Not anger. David Chen had outplayed her, but he'd also revealed something crucial. He was emotional about this property, his grandmother's memory, his family's dreams, his need to be seen as honorable. These were pressure points Karen could exploit. She opened a new browser window and began researching. David's teaching career, his family history, his grandmother's immigration story, his years in Taiwan. If he wanted to make this personal, she'd show him just how personal it could get. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is David. I didn't want to destroy you. I just wanted my land back. It's not too late to end this with dignity for both of us." Karen stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "You have no." Karen's response video went live at 11 p.m. that night, when the internet's attention was at its most volatile and unforgiving. She'd spent 6 hours crafting it, researching every detail of David Chen's family history, and she'd filmed it in her most photogenic room, the library, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and expensive artwork, providing the perfect backdrop for what she was about to do. Gone was the trembling victim from her previous videos. This Karen was composed, articulate, and absolutely ruthless. "Hello everyone, I'm Karen Martinez, and I want to address some things that have come to light today about David Chen and his so-called innocent family legacy." She held up a printed article, her manicured nails clearly visible against the paper. This is from the Taiwan Times, dated March 15, 2022. It's about David Chen's grandfather, who apparently owned significant real estate holdings in Taipei Holdings, worth approximately $12 million US. David wasn't in Taiwan caring for a poor, dying old man. He was managing an inheritance worth more than 10 times what my house cost to build. Karen had spent $3,000 hiring a private investigator that afternoon, and the money had been well spent. The PI had uncovered financial records, property transactions, and family business dealings that painted a very different picture of David Chen's circumstances. David talks about honoring his grandmother's memory, but let's discuss the real family business, shall we? Karen smiled coldly at the camera. The Chen family has been buying and developing property in California for decades. David's uncle owns a construction company that's built over 200 homes in Sacramento County. His cousin is a real estate attorney who specializes in wait for its property disputes and evictions. She held up more documents. David Chen isn't some poor, struggling teacher fighting for his grandmother's modest dream. He's part of a family real estate empire, and I'm standing in the way of a very profitable development opportunity. But the video was a masterpiece of misdirection and selective truth. Every fact Karen presented was technically accurate, but stripped of context and woven together to create a narrative of calculated manipulation rather than family tragedy. "Look at the timing," Karen continued, her voice gaining strength. "David conveniently stayed in Taiwan until my house was completely finished. He could have stopped construction at any time if he'd really cared about preventing unauthorized building on his land. But why stop a $1.4 million house from being built for free when you can swoop in and claim it afterward?" Her phone had been buzzing constantly during the filming, but she ignored it. Sandra had been calling and texting increasingly frantic, warnings about the restraining order, about felony charges, about the legal catastrophe Karen was about to unleash on herself. But Karen was beyond caring about consequences now. "And let's talk about those touching sketches of his grandmother's dream house," Karen said, holding up a printout of the architectural plans David had shown in his video. "I had these analyzed by a professional architect. Know what they are? They're preliminary drawings for a luxury development. Not a single-family home, a multi-unit complex designed to maximize profit per square foot." This was Karen's masterstroke, the lie that would poison everything David had said. The architect she'd consulted had actually confirmed that the sketches were for a modest single-family home, but in Karen's version, they became evidence of elaborate con game. David Chen has been planning this from the beginning. He let Harold Westfield commit fraud because it served his purposes. He let me build a beautiful home because it increased the property value, and now he's using social media sympathy and his dead grandmother's memory to steal everything I've worked for. Karen looked directly into the camera, and her mask of composure finally slipped, revealing the raw desperation underneath. "I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm a liar, a manipulator, someone who can't accept responsibility for her mistakes. But ask yourself this: if David Chen is really the innocent victim he claims to be, why won't he accept any of the compromise solutions my lawyer has proposed? Why is he so determined to destroy me completely, when there are ways we could both walk away from this with something?" She was referring to Sandra's latest Hail Mary attempt, a proposal that Karen keep the house in exchange for paying David fair market value for the land over a 30-year period. It was a reasonable offer that would have given David his money and let Karen keep her home. David had rejected it within hours, and Karen knew why. The legal precedent it would set could encourage other fraudulent property developments. But in Karen's telling, his rejection became proof of malicious intent. This isn't about justice. This isn't about honoring anyone's memory. This is about a wealthy family using their resources and connections to steal a middle-class woman's home through legal technicalities. Karen uploaded the video with a new hashtag #ChenFamilyScam. The response was immediate and nuclear. Within an hour, David's supporters had dissected every claim in Karen's video. The property records she'd cited were real, but they belonged to distant relatives David hadn't spoken to in years. The architect's analysis was exposed as fraudulent when the professional she'd quoted publicly denied ever speaking to her. Most damaging of all, someone had found the original context for the Taiwan Times article. It was about a property dispute where David's grandfather had been fighting against developers who were trying to force elderly residents out of their homes, but the worst revelation came from an unexpected source: Miguel Santos, the contractor who'd built Karen's house. Miguel posted his own video at 2 a.m., and it destroyed what remained of Karen's credibility. "I can't stay quiet anymore," Miguel said, sitting in his truck outside a construction site. "Mrs. Martinez is lying about everything, and I have proof." Miguel had kept meticulous records of the construction project, including emails, texts, and recorded phone calls with Karen throughout the building process. The evidence he presented was devastating. Karen had known about the property line discrepancies from the beginning. Miguel had repeatedly warned her that something was wrong with the surveys, but she'd ordered him to continue construction anyway. When Miguel had suggested halting work to verify ownership, Karen had threatened to sue him for breach of contract and destruction of her timeline. Most damning of all, Miguel had recorded a phone conversation where Karen explicitly said she didn't care about technicalities because possession is 9/10 of the law, and she'd worry about the legal stuff later. Mrs. Martinez knew she was taking a risk, Miguel said. She gambled that no one would challenge her, and she lost. Now she's trying to destroy an innocent man because she can't accept the consequences of her own choices. Karen watched Miguel's video with growing horror, realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing faster than she could repair it. But worse than the public humiliation was what happened next. At 6:47 a.m., exactly 24 hours after the process server had arrived at her door, Karen was awakened by her doorbell again. This time, it was the FBI. Special Agent Sarah Morrison was professional but implacable as she served Karen with a federal warrant. "Mrs. Martinez, you're under arrest for wire fraud, cyberstalking, and violation of federal communications laws." "What?" Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "Your recent video violated the restraining order prohibiting you from mentioning David Chen. Additionally, you used interstate commerce to distribute false statements about Mr. Chen and his family, with intent to damage their reputations and business interests. That's federal wire fraud." As Agent Morrison read Karen her rights, she continued explaining the charges. "You also hired a private investigator to dig up information about Mr. Chen's family for the purpose of harassment, which constitutes cyberstalking under federal law, and your fabricated architect's report constitutes fraud in interstate commerce." Karen's legs gave out, and she sank onto her front steps, the same steps where she'd stood 48 hours earlier, confident that her home was her castle and her rights were unassailable. "I want my lawyer," she whispered. "You'll have that opportunity," Agent Morrison said. "But first you need to understand something. Mr. Chen didn't file these complaints. His family in Taiwan did. Apparently, your video caused significant damage to their business interests, and they have much better lawyers than you do." As Karen was led away in handcuffs, she saw her neighbors emerging from their houses to watch. These were people she'd lived among for 18 months, people she'd invited to her housewarming party, people who'd admired her beautiful home and perfect life. Now they watched her downfall with a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. The last thing Karen saw as the FBI car pulled away was David Chen standing at the edge of her property line. He wasn't gloating or celebrating. He just looked tired and sad, like a man who'd won a war nobody should have had to fight. 3 hours later, as Karen sat in a federal holding cell waiting for Sandra to arrange bail, she finally understood the difference between being a victim and being victimized by your own choices.